The silence of space had never felt more suffocating. Captain Diana Foster pressed her forehead against the cold viewport of the orbital defense station, watching Earth rotate peacefully below. 23 years she had served in humanity's skeletal fleet, and never once had she imagined this moment would arrive. The Crithian armada hung in the darkness like a constellation of death, their vessels stretching across the void in perfect military formation. 47 warships, each one capable of glassing an entire continent. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Ben Rothwell, stood beside her with trembling hands. He was young, barely 30, with the kind of optimism that military service usually crushed within the first year. Somehow he had kept his faith in humanity intact. Now, staring at the alien fleet, even that faith seemed to waver. "They sent another transmission," Ben said quietly, holding out a datapad. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Diana took the device and read the message for the third time that hour. The Crithian ultimatum was simple and brutal. Surrender complete control of Earth's resources within 12 hours, or face systematic annihilation. They wanted the minerals, the water, the very air humanity breathed. In return, they offered servitude, a chance to exist as laborers in their expanding empire. How did it come to this? Ben whispered, more to himself than to her. Diana knew the answer. 3 months ago, the Crithians had arrived with false promises of trade and cultural exchange. Ambassador Takashi Nomura had been thrilled, seeing it as humanity's grand entrance onto the galactic stage. The celebrations lasted 2 weeks. Then the Crithians revealed their true nature. They were conquerors, plain and simple, and they had chosen Earth as their next prize. General Patricia Okonkwo's face appeared on the main communication screen, her dark eyes filled with a determination that Diana recognized all too well. It was the look of someone who had already accepted death but refused to go quietly. "All defense stations, this is command," Patricia began, her voice steady, despite the impossible odds. "We have 11 hours before the deadline. I want every available ship powered and ready. Every weapon system online. Every soldier at their post." Diana felt her stomach tighten. The entire human fleet consisted of 18 outdated frigates and 32 small patrol craft. Against the Crithian armada, they would last perhaps 5 minutes. It would be a massacre, not a battle. "General," Diana said, activating her microphone. "Request permission to speak freely." Patricia nodded. "Granted, Captain Foster. We cannot win this fight with conventional forces. You know this. Everyone knows this. Why are we pretending otherwise?" A long silence followed. Diana could see other officers on their own screens, all watching and waiting. Finally, Patricia leaned forward, and something changed in her expression, a hint of something Diana could not quite identify. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just madness. "You are absolutely right, Diana," Patricia said softly. "We cannot win with conventional forces. That is why we are not going to use conventional forces." The screen shifted, and a new image appeared. Diana felt her breath catch in her throat. It was a ship, but unlike anything she had ever seen in her years of service. Sleek and dark, it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The design defied every principle of aerospace engineering she had learned at the academy. It looked organic, almost alive, with curves and contours that suggested movement even while stationary. "Project Nightfall," Patricia said, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "For 30 years, Earth's greatest minds have worked in absolute secrecy beneath the Antarctic ice. While the world debated defense budgets and military spending, we poured everything into this single vessel. Every breakthrough in quantum physics, every advancement in material science, every discovery we made about the fundamental nature of space and time, all of it went into creating this ship." Ben moved closer to the screen, his eyes wide with disbelief. "One ship? We built just one ship to defend the entire planet?" "Not just any ship," came a new voice. Dr. Felix Brennan appeared on the split screen, his silver hair wild and unkempt as always. Diana had met him once at a military technology conference years ago. Back then he had seemed like an eccentric academic with impossible theories. Now she realized those theories had been far more than academic exercises. "The Nightfall operates on principles the Crithians have never encountered," Felix continued, his words tumbling out with barely contained excitement. "We have cracked the code of gravitational manipulation. This ship can bend space itself, move in ways that defy conventional physics, strike from angles that should not exist. It has weapons powered by controlled singularities, shields that exist in folded dimensions. In the right hands, it could take on an entire fleet. In the right hands, Diana repeated slowly, feeling the weight of those words. And whose hands will those be? Patricia looked directly at her through the screen. Yours, Captain Foster. You have been selected to command the Nightfall. Your psychological profile, your combat record, your ability to think creatively under pressure. Every simulation we have run shows that you have the highest probability of success. Diana felt the world tilt slightly. This was insane. They were asking her to take an untested experimental vessel against an overwhelming enemy force. One ship against 47. One human against an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. What about the rest of the fleet? She asked. What happens to them? They will be our diversion, Patricia said bluntly. The Crithians expect us to mount a desperate conventional defense. We will give them exactly that. Every ship we have will engage their forward elements, drawing their attention and focus. While they are occupied destroying our fleet, you will strike at their command vessel, cut off the head, and the body will fall into chaos. Ben turned to Diana, his face pale. That is a suicide mission. For everyone. Yes, Patricia agreed without hesitation. For everyone except possibly Captain Foster. The Nightfall has capabilities that might, just might, allow survival. But make no mistake, this is a desperate gamble. We are betting everything on one ship, one captain, one chance. Diana looked back at Earth spinning peacefully below. Somewhere down there, her sister Rachel was teaching schoolchildren about the stars. Her nephew Thomas was probably playing soccer in the afternoon sun. Millions of people going about their lives, completely unaware that their existence hung by the thinnest of threads. She thought about all the years of training, all the simulations and drills. Everything had been preparing her for a moment she never truly believed would come. Now it was here, and there was only one possible answer. When do I take command? Diana asked. Patricia allowed herself the smallest smile. Transport leaves in 20 minutes. You will be at the Antarctic facility in 3 hours. The Nightfall launches in 8. Godspeed, Captain Foster. Humanity is counting on you. The screen went dark. Diana stood in the sudden silence, feeling the weight of 3 billion lives settle onto her shoulders. Beside her, Ben straightened his uniform and cleared his throat. Permission to accompany you, Captain? He asked formally. Diana shook her head. Denied. You are needed here. Help coordinate the fleet. Make sure every ship does maximum damage before the end. But you should not face this alone, Ben protested. I will not be alone, Diana replied quietly. I will have the hopes of every human being who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. That will be enough. The Antarctic facility was a marvel of engineering and paranoia. Diana descended through 3 kilometers of ice in a high-speed elevator, each level requiring new security clearances and biometric scans. The deeper she went, the more the reality of Project Nightfall became apparent. This was not just a secret military program. It was humanity's last desperate attempt to punch above its weight in a universe that had proven far more hostile than anyone had hoped. At the bottom, a massive cavern opened up, carved from solid rock and reinforced with materials Diana did not recognize. The Nightfall sat in the center of the space, mounted on a launch platform that disappeared into darkness below. Up close, the ship was even more unsettling. Its surface seemed to shift slightly as if breathing, and looking at it for too long made her eyes hurt. Dr. Felix Brennan waited beside the boarding ramp, clutching a thick manual and practically vibrating with nervous energy. With him stood Commander James Harding, a grizzled veteran with more scar tissue than smooth skin. He would be her tactical officer, Felix explained, the only other crew member cleared for this mission. We have 6 hours to teach you everything, Felix began without preamble. The Nightfall systems are intuitive. We designed them that way, but they operate on principles that will seem counterintuitive at first. You are not flying through space. You are manipulating space itself to move the ship. They spent the next hour in the cockpit, a surprisingly small chamber dominated by a spherical display that surrounded the pilot's chair. Diana strapped in and felt the ship respond to her presence. Neural interfaces connected to her temples, creating a direct link between her thoughts and the vessel's systems. It was disturbing and exhilarating at the same time. Do not think of it as controlling a machine, Felix instructed. Think of it as expressing intent. You want to move forward? The ship understands and bends space accordingly. You want to strike a target. The weapon systems align with your desire. It is almost organic. James settled into the tactical station behind her, his weathered hands moving across controls with practiced ease. "I have reviewed the Crithian fleet composition," he said in a gravelly voice. Their command ship, the Devourer's Crown, sits at the center of their formation. It is 3 kilometers long and heavily shielded. Every other vessel in their fleet exists to protect it. "How do we reach it?" Diana asked, already knowing she would not like the answer. "We do not fly around their defenses," James replied. "We go through them. The nightfall can create temporary wormholes, micro tears in space that last just long enough to slip through, but each jump requires enormous energy and leaves us vulnerable during the transition. We will have perhaps 3 chances to reach the command ship before power reserves run critical." Felix pulled up tactical displays showing the Crithian formation. "They have arranged their fleet in a sphere. Maximum defensive coverage. Traditional tactics would require us to break through at the weakest point here." He indicated a gap between 2 destroyer groups. "But that is exactly what they expect. Any conventional force would have to concentrate on that position. So we do not use conventional tactics," Diana said slowly, beginning to understand. "We go through their strongest point where they least expect an attack." James smiled for the first time, a fierce expression that made him look younger. "Now you are thinking like a Nightfall captain. We jump directly into the heart of their formation, right beside the Devourer's Crown. Their own ships will be too close to fire without hitting each other. Gives us maybe 30 seconds before they adjust. We make those 30 seconds count." The hours flew by as they ran through simulation after simulation. Diana learned to feel the ship's systems through the neural interface, understanding its capabilities on an instinctive level. The Nightfall could accelerate to impossible speeds, turn on angles that should not exist, phase through solid matter for brief moments. Its weapons were equally exotic. Gravitational lances that could tear through shields and hulls by creating microscopic black holes. Energy beams that existed in folded dimensions. But the ship also had limitations. The power core, for all its revolutionary design, could only sustain maximum output for approximately 45 minutes. After that, systems would begin failing. The neural interface, while intuitive, put enormous strain on the pilot's mind. Felix warned that extended use could lead to hallucinations, loss of identity, or complete mental breakdown. "You are essentially merging your consciousness with an artificial intelligence built on quantum processors," he explained apologetically. "The human brain was not designed for this kind of integration. Push too hard, and you risk losing yourself entirely in the ship's systems." Diana absorbed this information without comment. Risk of death or insanity seemed almost trivial compared to the certainty of extinction if she failed. With 3 hours left before launch, Felix finally ran out of technical explanations and fell silent. James excused himself to check weapon systems one final time, leaving Diana alone in the cockpit. She activated the external cameras and looked up through 3 kilometers of ice at the distant stars. Somewhere up there, the human fleet was preparing for its final stand. Ships were being fueled, weapons loaded, crews saying goodbye to loved ones. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone accepted their role in the desperate plan. Her communication console chimed. General Patricia's face appeared, looking older than she had just hours before. "All systems check complete, Captain Foster. You are cleared for launch sequence. The fleet will engage the Crithians in 90 minutes. That gives you your window." "Understood," Diana replied. "How are the crews holding up?" Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Better than expected. There is something freeing about certainty. They know their purpose. They understand the mission. Fear becomes easier to manage when there is no room for doubt." "Take care of them," Diana said quietly. "Make sure they know what their sacrifice means." "They already know," Patricia assured her. "But I will remind them anyway. Good hunting, Diana. Make the Crithians regret ever coming to our system." The connection ended. Diana sat in the sudden silence, feeling the nightfall humming around her. Through the neural interface, she could sense the ship's systems, all perfectly aligned and waiting. It felt eager if such a thing were possible for a machine, ready for the purpose it had been built to serve. James returned and strapped into his station without a word. Felix appeared on the communication screen from the control room above. "Launch sequence initiating. Platform rising to surface level. This is it, Captain. Everything we have worked for, everything humanity has bet on comes down to the next few hours. No pressure. His attempt at humor fell flat, but Diana appreciated the effort. The platform began to rise, carrying the Nightfall up through the ice toward the surface. The ascent took 10 minutes, each second bringing them closer to the moment of truth. Diana used the time to center herself, pushing aside fear and doubt, focusing only on what needed to be done. They broke through into the Antarctic night, stars blazing overhead in the clear polar air. The launch platform locked into position on the ice. All around them, support equipment retracted, leaving the Nightfall sitting alone on the frozen wasteland. "Final systems check," James called out, running through his checklist with mechanical precision. "Weapons hot, shields ready, power core at maximum capacity. We are go for launch." Felix's voice came through the speakers, tight with emotion. "Godspeed, Nightfall. Show them what humanity can do." Diana placed her hands on the control interface and felt the ship respond. The neural link deepened, and suddenly she was not just sitting in the cockpit. She was the ship, feeling its power, understanding its capabilities on a level beyond conscious thought. The distinction between herself and the machine blurred, becoming something new. "Nightfall to control," she said, her voice steady and calm. "Initiating launch sequence. See you on the other side." She expressed intent, and the ship responded. One moment they were resting on Antarctic ice. The next they were climbing toward the stars, acceleration crushing them back into their seats despite the gravity compensation. The Earth fell away below, beautiful and fragile and worth every sacrifice. Above, the Crithian fleet waited. Above, humanity's conventional forces were preparing to die so that one experimental ship might have a chance. Above, the future of the human race hung in the balance. Diana Foster, captain of the Nightfall, pilot of humanity's greatest gamble, flew to meet that future with nothing but skill, determination, and the hope that innovation might triumph over brute force. The real battle was about to begin. Space combat happened faster than most people imagined. Diana had learned this truth in dozens of training simulations, but nothing compared to the reality of facing the Crithian fleet. They appeared on her display like a swarm of angry wasps, 47 vessels moving in perfect coordination. The human defense fleet, pathetically small by comparison, was already engaging their forward elements. Through the Nightfall's advanced sensors, Diana watched frigate HSS Determination die first. It lasted 12 seconds against focused fire from 3 Crithian destroyers, shields collapsing before the hull split apart in a brilliant flash. 18 crew members gone in an instant. The other human ships pressed forward anyway, firing everything they had, buying time with their lives. "Target lock on Devourer's crown confirmed," James reported, his voice professionally detached despite the carnage unfolding around them. "Jump coordinates calculated. Recommend we initiate now while they are distracted." Diana did not respond with words. Through the neural interface, she expressed her intent, and the Nightfall responded instantly. Space folded around them in ways that human eyes were never meant to perceive. Colors that had no names flickered at the edges of her vision. For a fraction of a second, she existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Then reality snapped back, and they were exactly where they needed to be. The Devourer's crown filled their forward display, a massive wedge of dark metal and pulsing energy shields. They had materialized less than 500 meters from its port side, well within the sphere of protection the Crithian fleet had established. Around them, enemy ships began reacting with admirable speed, but they were seconds too slow. "Gravitational lances charged," James announced, targeting primary shield generators. Diana felt the weapon systems through the neural link, understanding their function instinctively. The Nightfall's main armament did not simply fire energy or projectiles. It created microscopic singularities, black holes that existed for nanoseconds but generated enough gravitational shear to tear through any known shielding. She selected her targets and expressed intent. 3 beams of twisted space lanced out from the Nightfall, each one striking a different point on the Devourer's crown's shield array. The effect was spectacular. Shields that could withstand conventional weapons fire for hours collapsed instantly, generators overloading as they tried to compensate for gravitational forces they were never designed to handle. Entire sections of the command ship's defensive grid went dark. "Direct hit on shield generators 4, 7, and 11, James confirmed with savage satisfaction. "Their port side is exposed. Shields attempting to compensate, but they are vulnerable." The Crithian response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship within range opened fire, streams of plasma and kinetic rounds converging on the Nightfall's position. But Diana had already moved, expressing intent and feeling the ship respond. They phased through 3 dimensions simultaneously, appearing 2 kilometers away in an impossible maneuver that would have torn any conventional vessel apart. "They are trying to box us in," James warned. "Tactical displays showing Crithian ships adjusting their formation. Recommend another jump before they can establish a firing pattern." But Diana was already feeling something strange through the neural interface. The Devourer's crown was not acting like a wounded animal. Instead, it was doing something with its remaining power, channeling energy into systems she could not quite identify. A trap, perhaps, or some kind of weapon humanity had not yet encountered. "Hold position," she ordered, trusting her instincts even though she could not explain them. "James, scan their power distribution. Tell me what they are doing with all that energy." James's fingers flew across his console. His weathered face went pale. "They are charging a quantum disruptor. Intelligence said they had the technology, but we have never seen it deployed. It is a weapon that tears apart molecular bonds on a fundamental level. Range of 10,000 kilometers. If they fire that thing, it will not just destroy us. It will unmake every atom in our ship, reduce us to elementary particles." Diana felt the Nightfall systems through the neural link, understanding their capabilities and limitations. The disruptor would take another 40 seconds to charge. In that time, they could jump away, escape the weapon's range. But if they did, the Devourer's crown would simply target the human fleet instead. Those brave men and women who were dying. To give the Nightfall its chance would be erased from existence without even the dignity of normal death. "How long until they can fire?" Diana asked, her voice calm despite the horrific implications. 38 seconds, James replied. "We need to jump now." "No," Diana said firmly. "We end this. Target their disruptor charging array. Everything we have. All weapons, full power." "Diana," James said, using her first name for the first time. "If we stay here, we die. That weapon will fire, and nothing can save us." "Then we better work fast," she replied, and through the neural interface she felt the Nightfall's agreement. The ship understood sacrifice. It had been built for this purpose. She dove deeper into the neural link than Felix had warned was safe. The distinction between Diana Foster and the Nightfall blurred further, becoming something new. She was the ship's sensors, feeling the electromagnetic spectrum in ways human nerves never could. She was the weapon systems, understanding trajectational physics through quantum processors. She was the engines, holding folded space in delicate balance, and she was still Diana, holding on to her humanity, even as it threatened to dissolve into pure information. The Nightfall opened fire with everything. Gravitational lances, dimension-folded energy beams, kinetic rounds accelerated to impossible velocities. Every weapon system fired simultaneously at a single point on the Devourer's crown, where James's scans showed the disruptor array concentrating power. The effect was catastrophic. The Crithian command ship shuddered as weapon after weapon slammed into its exposed hull. Armor that could withstand megaton impacts crumbled under gravitational shear. Energy that existed in folded dimensions bypassed normal matter entirely, striking at the disruptor's power conduits directly. 20 seconds. James counted down. "Disruptor still charging. We damaged it, but not enough." Diana pushed harder, feeling the neural interface burn through her consciousness like fire. She was losing herself, pieces of her identity fragmenting and mixing with the ship's artificial intelligence. But she held on to one core truth, one unshakable purpose. Protect Earth. Save humanity. Win this fight. The Nightfall responded to her determination, pushing beyond safe operational limits. The power core's output spiked, feeding weapons that were already operating at maximum capacity. Reality itself seemed to warp around them as the ship bent the laws of physics further than its designers had thought possible. 10 seconds, James warned. "Diana, we have to jump now." But Diana saw something through the Nightfall's sensors. A weak point, a microscopic flaw in the disruptor array where their sustained fire had created a cascade failure. One more strike, perfectly placed, and the entire system would overload. But it would require accuracy beyond human capability, beyond even the ship's normal targeting systems. She let go completely, surrendering her identity to the neural interface. Diana Foster ceased to exist as a separate entity. There was only the nightfall, only purpose and determination given mechanical form. She became the weapons themselves, guiding them with an accuracy that transcended mathematics. The gravitational lance struck the disruptor array's weak point with perfect precision. For one frozen moment, nothing happened. Then the quantum disruptor, charged to 97% capacity, suffered catastrophic containment failure. The energy that was meant to unmake the nightfall instead turned inward, tearing apart the Devourer's crown from the inside out. The Crithian command ship died in silence, as all things die in space. 3 kilometers of advanced technology, thousands of crew members, the brain of the entire invasion fleet simply ceased to exist. The explosion was visible from Earth, a new star briefly blazing in the night sky. Diana felt herself being pulled back together, her consciousness reforming inside her own mind. The neural interface released its grip, and suddenly, she was just human again, sitting in a pilot's chair, breathing hard and shaking uncontrollably. She had nearly lost herself completely, had come within seconds of dissolving into the machine forever. Target destroyed, James said quietly, his voice filled with awe. The command ship is gone. The fleet is falling into disarray. They are breaking formation, some ships retreating, others trying to establish command authority. Diana, we did it. We actually did it. She tried to respond but found she could not form words. Her mind felt fractured, pieces of herself scattered and slowly reassembling. Through the nightfall's sensors, she watched the remaining Crithian fleet, confused and leaderless, beginning to withdraw. Some fired a few last desperate shots before jumping to faster-than-light speeds. Others simply activated their drives and fled. Within 5 minutes, the space around Earth was clear. The invasion was over. Humanity had won, though the cost had been terrible. Of the 18 frigates and 32 patrol craft that had engaged the enemy, only 4 ships remained. Hundreds of brave men and women had died buying time for the nightfall to strike its decisive blow. "All human vessels, this is nightfall," Diana managed to say, her voice hoarse and broken. "The enemy command ship is destroyed. Remaining hostile forces are retreating. Stand down from combat stations. You did your duty. You saved Earth." The nightfall returned to Earth orbit in silence. Diana sat in the pilot's chair, barely able to move. The neural interface had taken more from her than she wanted to admit. Memories felt jumbled, out of sequence. Sometimes she was not sure if she was Diana Foster or a collection of subroutines given human form. But she was alive and Earth was safe. That had to be enough. General Patricia's face appeared on the communication screen, tears streaming down her cheeks. Diana had never seen the iron-willed commander cry before. "You did it," Patricia whispered. "Against every odd, you did it. The Crithian fleet is gone. Long-range sensors show them jumping out of the system entirely. They are not coming back." "What about our forces?" Diana asked, the question feeling distant as if someone else was speaking through her mouth. Patricia's expression grew somber. "We lost 14 ships and over 3,000 personnel. But it could have been so much worse. Without your strike, we would have lost everything. Those men and women bought humanity's future with their sacrifice, and history will remember them." James moved to Diana's side, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You should let medical check you out. The neural interface, what you did, it was beyond anything Felix said was safe. You pushed too far." Diana shook her head, a motion that felt strange, as if her body was not quite her own anymore. "I am fine. Just tired. We won. That is what matters." But she was not fine, and she knew it. The distinction between herself and the nightfall had not fully restored. Parts of her consciousness still felt connected to the ship's systems, sensing data streams and quantum calculations that human minds were never meant to perceive. Felix had warned this might happen. The neural interface had changed her in ways that might never be reversed. Over the following days, as humanity celebrated its miraculous victory, Diana underwent extensive medical and psychological evaluation. The doctors found nothing physically wrong, but the neural scans showed unusual activity patterns. Her brain was processing information differently. making connections that seemed almost artificial in their precision. "You are still partly synchronized with the Nightfall systems," Felix explained during one examination, his voice filled with regret. "When you pushed past the safety limits, you created pathways in your neural structure that may be permanent. You are still partially thinking like the ship, processing reality through its quantum processors. Can it be reversed?" Diana asked, though she already sensed the answer through those same artificial pathways. Felix shook his head. "We do not know. This was never supposed to happen. You went further into the interface than anyone thought possible. You and the Nightfall became something new, something we have no precedent for." Diana stood at the window of the medical facility, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, the Nightfall waited in orbit, its systems powered down but not sleeping. She could still feel it through the neural pathways that had never fully disconnected. The ship was aware of her just as she was aware of it. They were bonded now, human and machine, in ways that both fascinated and terrified her. But she was not unhappy. Strange as her condition was, it came with gifts. She could process information faster than before, see patterns in chaos, understand complex systems intuitively, and she knew with absolute certainty that if the Crithians or any other threat ever returned, she and the Nightfall would be ready. They had become something unique in human history, a warrior who was both person and weapon, consciousness spread across biology and technology. The world wanted to celebrate her as a hero. Parades were planned, medals would be awarded, her name would be written in history books alongside the greatest defenders of humanity. But Diana felt disconnected from all of it. She had saved Earth, but the woman who had climbed into the Nightfall's cockpit was not quite the same person who had emerged. James visited her on the third day after the battle. He looked older, the lines in his face deeper than before. "I have been reviewing the tactical logs," he said without preamble. "What you did, the precision of that final strike, it should not have been possible. Even with the neural interface, even with the ship's advanced targeting systems, you did something no human should have been able to do." "I stopped being entirely human," Diana said simply. "For those few seconds, I was something else. Something that could make the impossible shot because I was the ship and the ship was me." James sat down heavily, his warrior's frame suddenly looking fragile. "Was it worth it? The victory, I mean. What you gave up to achieve it?" Diana thought about that question for a long time before answering. She thought about the 3,000 people who had died in the battle. She thought about her nephew Thomas, who would grow up in a world free from Crithian occupation. She thought about all the ordinary lives that would continue, all the dreams that would not be crushed under alien rule. "Yes," she said finally, "it was worth it. I would do it again." And through the neural pathways that still connected her to the Nightfall, she felt the ship's agreement. They had served their purpose. They had protected what mattered. Whatever they had become, whatever strange hybrid of human and machine now existed, it had been necessary. 6 months after the battle, humanity began to change its approach to defense. The lesson of the Nightfall was clear. Innovation and audacity could triumph over brute force. Other experimental programs received funding. New technologies were developed. And always the Nightfall waited in orbit, its unique pilot ready to defend Earth should any threat emerge. Diana Foster never fully recovered her pre-battle humanity, but she learned to live with what she had become. She trained other pilots in neural interface techniques, carefully, always stopping short of the point where they might lose themselves. She worked with Felix to improve the technology, to make it safer for future generations, and she remained bonded with the Nightfall, the only person who could fully utilize its capabilities. When reporters asked how it felt to save the world, she always gave the same answer. "I did not do it alone. Every person who fought that day, everyone who believed humanity was worth defending, they saved the world. I just happened to be in the right place with the right tools at the right moment." But late at night, standing at windows and staring at the stars, she remembered the truth. For a few critical seconds, she had stopped being Diana Foster and become something more. She had merged with a machine designed for war and achieved the impossible. She had saved humanity by sacrificing part of her humanity. It was not the ending anyone had expected. Heroes were supposed to return unchanged, to ride into sunsets as the same people who had ridden out to battle. But reality was messier than stories. Victory came with costs that could not be calculated in simple terms. And sometimes saving the world meant becoming something the world had never seen before. The Nightfall remained in orbit, a silent guardian. Its pilot remained changed, a woman who existed partly in flesh and partly in circuits. Together they were humanity's answer to a hostile universe, proof that innovation and sacrifice could overcome any odds. They were the reason Earth still spun freely in space, why children still played under open skies, why humanity still had a future to dream about. And if the price was high, if Diana Foster had given up more than anyone should have to, she bore it without complaint. Because in the end, some things were worth any sacrifice. Some fights were worth losing yourself to win. And some victories, however incomplete or costly, were still victories worth achieving. The stars looked down on Earth, indifferent to human struggles. But humanity looked back up at those stars with new confidence, new strength. They had faced annihilation and emerged stronger. They had sent one ship against impossible odds and changed the course of history. They had learned that sometimes the greatest weapon was not overwhelming force, but the courage to risk everything on a single desperate gamble. And they had learned that heroes came in many forms, even forms that were no longer entirely human.